Good afternoon and welcome to the latest Humpday Hangout. I'm one of your co-hosts, Steve Pegram, president of the International Society of Fire Service Instructors and fire chief in Goshen, Ohio. I'm here with my two co-hosts, Brad and Aaron, as usual, and we'll get to them in just a second. I want to welcome you on this December 7th, 2016, to our Humpday Hangout focused on fire training. Of course, December 7th is an important day for our nation, the remembrance of Pearl Harbor, which pretty much was our entrance into World War II. And so we want to remember the veterans and all those that were killed on that day and that served during that war and protecting our freedoms that we all enjoy today. So just a moment for those people as we celebrate December 7th. As we mentioned last month on our Hump Day Hangout, our topic was talking about the ISFSI Fire Engineering Instructor of the Year Award. The George D. Post Instructor of the Year Award, given every year at FDIC. Those nominations are still open until the end of the month. You can get a form and download it at isfsi.org or at fireengineering.com. Fill out the application and send it in to fire engineering. Really a great opportunity to recognize somebody who does great things as a fire instructor. Doesn't need to be the biggest department in the country, doesn't necessarily eliminate you because it's a small town. We really would like to see and hear what great instructors are doing out there. And if you go back in the archives, you can look at our most recent Hump Day Hangout from November when we talked about that topic. And we had 3 past Instructor of the Year Award winners on there with us talking about fire training. So a neat opportunity that we had last month. As we're prepping for FDIC, another very important honor is the Courage and Valor Award, which is named after New York City Deputy Chief Ray Downey, who served many years as a rescue captain and rescue chief in FDNY. And the Courage and Valor Award is given every year to a firefighter also at FDIC. Those nominations are also currently open. And really looking forward to see what nominations come in for that. And, a firefighter out there who's gone above and beyond the call of duty in helping someone, whether it be a civilian or another firefighter. ISFSI news, probably the most important thing going on with the Instructor Society right now is we are in the midst of board elections. Several positions are open, and if you're a member of ISFSI, you should have already received an email link to vote electronically. If you didn't, please get a hold of us at the ISFSI main office or through the website. But elections are currently open, and those board positions will take their oath of office at FDIC. And as we lead into FDIC, I want to remind everybody that FDIC 2017 is April 24th through the 29th. Myself, Aaron, Brad will all be there teaching, along with a host of more than another, I think about 200 other fire instructors from all over the country and all over the world, really. So we look forward to that, and we hope that you join us in April in Indianapolis. Unfortunately, this month we do have some news that we recently lost a well-known FDIC hot instructor, Matt. And Aaron, I'd like you to just chime in on that a little bit for us.
Well, thanks, Steve. Yeah, last week we got the sad news that District Chief from the Orlando Fire Department, Matt Nedgley, passed away. And many of us knew Matty for years. He did all kinds of training. He was the founder of the Orlando Fire Conference. And for anybody who took any of the classes with Mike Champo's hot classes with fireground laddering, street smart laddering, Matty was a huge part of that group, and just one of those people you always remember after the day you met him, and just a great fella. He leaves behind a wife and 2 beautiful children, and a really grieving fire department and a ton of friends. So his memorial will be this coming weekend. Just wanted to pass that on because a lot of our viewers and a lot of our students have had Matty over the years as an instructor, and the man just passed on great things to a lot of firefighters to keep them going. So our prayers are certainly with Matt and with the Nedgley family and with everybody from OFD and certainly with Lieutenant Champo's hot group because they lost a shining star there. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Aaron. With that, for anybody that may be watching this month and haven't been on the Hump Day Hangout before, every month myself, Aaron and Brad are on here. And Aaron, if you would just go ahead and give it a little intro on yourself and our topic today.
Sure. My name's Aaron Heller, and I'm a captain in Hamilton, New Jersey. I've been there for 27 years in the career side, and I also served as a volunteer chief in a little town called New Egypt, New Jersey for many, many years. I've had the good fortune to see both sides of that world, and I own a training company, so I get out on the road quite a bit. So I'm very fortunate. Today we're talking about training props and all the different stuff and the new technology coming that we can utilize and that we should be utilizing to really up our training game throughout the world. And we've got guests with us here from BullX, and I think it's going to be great topic to talk about. Send us your questions, because this is certainly a hot topic. I just came back from teaching out in the Midwest, and we utilized some props I'd never used before, never seen before, and gave me some cool ideas. So let's have a great discussion about it.
You know, you brought up a great point. Is this is interactive, so if you would like to get on Twitter and ask us a question, we monitor Twitter. Hashtag FETalk is the hashtag that you can catch us on. And so if you have a comment, a question, or something like that, we monitor that throughout the show. You can get a hold of us again, hashtag F as in Frank, E as in Edward, talk. And we'd be happy to try to get that in on the show as well. Brad, why don't you introduce yourself and also our guest who's with you, I believe, at a meeting.
All right. Thank you very much, Chief. Always appreciate getting the opportunity to be on here and get to talk with ISFSI members and other instructors all across the country every month doing these things. My name's Brad French. I'm a lieutenant on an engine company in Dayton, Ohio. I also serve on the board of directors for the ISFSI, the Eastern Region Director. So I certainly encourage, as you did earlier, all those members out there listening to get on and vote. We have a lot of positions that are up for grabs, and we love seeing members becoming involved and running for positions and wanting to move the society in the right direction. And I happen to be up for election this time around, so I encourage everybody to get on and vote. I actually happen to be at a meeting up at NFPA. We're up in Quincy, Massachusetts right now at a technical committee meeting for NFPA 1402. A lot of different things going on with that standard, moving it from a guide into a standard and some of the transitions associated with that. And so thought it would be a perfect time to talk a little bit about props and simulators and things like that. That standard is the Guide to Building Fire Service Training Centers. And so I happened to be up in at NFPA for a meeting and wanted to bring in Kyle here to provide some of his expertise and opinions on some of the issues that we'll get into with props and simulators. So I'll kick it over to Kyle for an introduction, and we'll kind of come back to him throughout the afternoon here.
Thanks. First, I really appreciate you guys having me here today. I'm with BullX. I've been with BullX for about 6 years now, and working on the custom build side of things, which involves training centers and training props. I'm also a volunteer assistant fire chief in my hometown, which is a rural department, the village of Altamont, which is right outside where BullX is headquartered. So, like you guys, right in the thick of things, and kind of have the full scope of what's going on as well.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Bonus, double bonus. He's a double guest. So talking about props, and Aaron and Brad both kind of mentioned it, but I think in the fire service, especially maybe for Aaron and I, when we started off, we didn't have all the commercial props that are available today, but we still made stuff, to enhance training. And I think that's the big thing when I think of props. It's things that we build or things that we buy that help us enhance training. And I know there's a lot of stuff on the commercial side as technology has improved. Brad or Aaron, where do you want to start talking about props?
Well, that's a good question. Do we want to jump into structural stuff first? Do we want to jump into smaller homemade stuff? We can go either way. I think maybe why don't we start out, since we've got Kyle with us, why don't we run right into what's going on commercially, what the future of it looks like, and what we've got as far as mobile trainers versus what we've got as fixed facilities. Maybe that's a good way to lead into it, and then we can go from there as to the add-ons that we can do to to kind of augment all that.
Sure.
Yeah, maybe Kyle could start us out, maybe just kind of a 30,000-foot view of all the different types of things that are out there.
Sure, there's lots of stuff out there, right? So, like you guys are saying, started out with building like your own props, right? So, and you know, the commercial side of things kind of took that and probably started implementing some safeties to that. And not saying you know, the fire departments were being unsafe, but we want to make sure that there were some certain safety precautions that were being taken care of and standardized, I guess is a good way to put that. But yeah, as far as some props out there, you know, we can talk about live fire props, we can talk about non-live fire props. And the way Bullx, you know, really envisions things is, you know, an escalating training program. Right? And I think this is how most fire departments envision their training programs, but utilizing your training props as an escalating program through your training. So maybe you start out with a simulator that's, you know, not live fire. Maybe it's a digital type of simulation. You know, there's even driving simulators out there that are digital, right? And then once they advance through that, you can take them up to maybe a gas-based fire, and then after they advance through that, step them up to a Class A-based fire. So that's kind of what you know, our look at the training programs are as an escalating program, progressive kind of program.
Yeah, you know, I'll just chime in on that a little bit, and this isn't necessarily with any one particular prop, but maybe a set of props. When we talk, there's obviously a whole lot of chatter going on in the fire service right now about fire dynamics, fire behavior, things like that. And when you talk about the educational side, the hands-on physical educational side of fire dynamics, that is a perfect example of a way to utilize different props to kind of step up your knowledge in that topic, right? So whereas you start out as a base foundation with some classroom material and videos and things like that, then you can step up to something very, very simple, like maybe even a candle experiment in a class, which is something that you can make just going and getting components at the local dollar store or something like that to do, you know, a lighter and a candle and a glass jar to do some ventilation control and some of the things that we do. For example, in the ISFSI Principles of Modern Fire Attack program, we do a lot of candle experiments just right there in the classroom with students, and it has an impact on being able to do simple little things to show flammable ranges and things like that using the metal screens over a candle flame. And again, you're talking, you know, $30 at the local dollar store to make a bunch of those. So that's something that's easily made around the fire station. And then you can step up from that to, for example, the fire behavior or commonly referred to as the dollhouse burns and things like that, and making those props, and then step up further from that into a fire behavior full-size container, a, you know, flashover can type of thing, and step up from that into a full-size Class A fixed facility and stuff. So just using fire dynamics as an example, there's a wide array of things that you can do to kind of build that knowledge sequentially from things that you can make and do at a desk, all the way building up to the point of using full-size props, simulators, and Class A burn buildings. So I'm sure there's other props that are and other topics, I should say, that are similar, but that's one good example of a progression that's easily accomplished with a variety of different props.
Yeah, there's a lot of props, right? I think a lot of people think of props and training aids as you know, your big props, your fire props, but a lot of people might forget, even, you know, myself included, those small, like you're saying, desktop props that are really beneficial and really valuable. I think that's a really good point.
Is you may or may not know this, on the commercial side, what is probably the most popular or yeah, I guess most popular prop that is commercially made that you see in the industry?
I think your mobile live fire trainers, you know, like your propane-driven mobile trainers, are definitely really, really popular. Like your car fire props, your pressure vessel type props, flammable liquid trays, things like that. Things that departments can move from site to site or even just around their training facility. Those have been probably some of the most popular. And also, you know, I guess speaking at least for Bullx, are small simulators as well that aren't necessarily live fire, like the digital simulators, where people can bring those into acquired structures that they're having, they're not able to maybe burn down, right? So those have been really, really popular. You know, they're not the the systems that are hundreds of thousands of dollars are a little bit more affordable.
And Chief, maybe another place that I would be curious to get your opinion and Aaron's opinion, and maybe we could take the conversation a little bit, is the kind of the overview, the philosophical view of gas-fed fire training props and things like that versus Class A, and the what kind of simulated realism we can accomplish in one versus the other, and even expanding that into some of the digital props. And admittedly, not to put Kyle on the spot, but I would consider myself a little bit more skeptical of some of those types of things. The more we get away from the Class A type of materials, especially in terms of visibility inside the container and things like that, and he can go into some of the ways that they try to simulate that. But what are your guys' thoughts on that? Do you think that we're getting into a scenario in the fire service with some of the gas-fired props in the interior and things like that, where we're creating conditions that are such that they're so far away from realistic from a real house fire that it's detrimental, or do you think that's all positive?
I'll start off and give you a chief perspective a little bit, and it'll be a perfect segue into Aaron, because Aaron got involved in one of my projects here in Ohio that I worked on. I've been involved in 2 departments that purchased live fire trailers, basically, multiple rooms with staircases and a lot, and within that mobile fire trainer were lots of different props, right? So you had windows and doors and forcible entry stuff and walls that move. So there was a lot of stuff you could do, but they were all propane or gas fed. And I think the decision why we went that way for the most part was the convenience of being able to set up and do training pretty much anywhere at any time, but also the ability to hit a button and take a run. And when you're doing Class A fire, whether you're doing Class A fire in a burn building or you're doing Class A fire in an acquired structure, if you get a run or the big one comes in or whatever, you can't just hit a button and leave. And I think for a lot of departments, whether it's a small organization that only has 10 or 12 people showing up on a drill night, or an organization that's predominantly paid staffing, where you really don't have the resources to not handle emergencies while you're at training, I think it opened up for us in the last 10 years or so, it opened up a huge opportunity for us to provide more realistic training without leaving our firehouse. And that's the route we went. In both cases, the trailers were funded by AFG grants. So the Assistance to Firefighters grant program does provide money in the training line item for mobile fire training simulators. And both of the ones that I'm familiar with, and both of them were actually built by different companies, but both were in the $500,000 range. So pretty high tech equipment that you could use for live fire, and we do. But we also use it on a regular basis, not just using the live fire part of the prop, but using it for all the other stuff, for roof ventilation, for stretching hose lines, for water supply, standpipe operations, search and rescue, RIT, bailout, throwing ladders. There's a million things you can do, but it allows us to have something that is built for that we can beat on a little bit, that we can flow water. Whereas prior to that, I think a lot of our simulations were, a flashlight stuck inside a traffic cone, and okay, this is your fire. And you stretched the line, and maybe you had water in the line, maybe you didn't have water in the line, and you were stretching through your firehouse. And it got to the point that you could walk around the firehouse with your eyes closed because you knew the building stuff. And so the props for us, the 2 that I'm most familiar with and we currently use, pretty fancy, pretty expensive. There's a lot of maintenance and stuff that goes into it. And obviously you have the cost of the propane that we burn when we burn in it. But it's really for us, especially being smaller combination career departments, opened up a realm of training that we never had before. Prior to that, it was either we didn't do it or we had to pay overtime to do it and send people off site. And so it really didn't get done a whole lot. Now we're regularly using the prop, not just for live fire, as I said, but for all kinds of a host of other things. And while I was doing some of this training, the original training to bring it in, the 3 of us that co-host this all have a connection in Xenia, Ohio. where Brad worked before I did. So we didn't work there at the same time, but we both worked there. And then when I was in Xenia, Ohio, I wrote a grant for them to get a live fire trailer. And Aaron and his training company came in and did the training when it was delivered on how to operate it and use it and stuff like that. So I'll use that as a segue to throw it over to Aaron and let him talk a little bit about, because I know he's got a lot of experience using these props and actually teaching people how to use props.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. I've worked for a few of the major manufacturers that build and sell these things, and I've heard all the sales pitches, and I've seen them and worked in them. I've spent many hours in and on and around these units from a lot of the manufacturers, and so in the beginning of my thought process going to work with these, I thought, well, I like Class A, and this is it's prop. It's okay, but it's prop. And I got to tell you, the one who probably opened my eyes most was probably Billy Hobson, who thought outside the box and looked at these props and said, listen, you can have 17 to 20 to 25 firefighters operating on a mobile trainer at one time in a safe manner. And you can really, if you schedule it right and you plan it out right, you can get a lot of good training done in an evening or an afternoon or whatever the case may be. And like you said, we can be doing forcible entry. We can be doing fire attack, stretching and operating lines, ventilation work with the saw props on the roofs of these things, throwing portable ladders, and doing some searches, although it's very limited to the searches in such a tight area. But there's a lot of things you can teach, including, VES or VEIS. It was VES when I learned it. But, all of these things can be going on at one time in these buildings, so to speak, in these mobile facilities. So, yeah, the realism isn't quite the same, obviously. And there's only one way you get that realism. I don't care what prop we build. The only way to really get real is to do it in acquired structures, but that's a very limited option for most of us. So, so these definitely have their place. As far as the firefighting portion of it, yeah, you're fighting gas fires, and we can take the visibility down to damn near nothing with the smoke machines and everything that's involved in it. But at least it kind of serves as a bit of a laboratory. It lets you see your firefighters, how they're positioning themselves on the lines, and it gives them some heat, a little bit of heat anyway, to push them down a little. So I think they've got a really important role. The other thing I like about them is that when you get into more rural settings that just can't afford to buy brand new, big, fancy set facilities somewhere, we can roll these around to different departments and do some regional stuff, like the idea in Xenia. And I did a lot of training in Louisiana when Baker, Louisiana bought one, and Bayou Cane bought one. So I did a lot of training down there, and that was the same principle. It was, let's get some regional stuff going. So, is $500,000 a lot of money? Of course it is, but it's not nearly what it is to put fixed facilities in place. And it gives us something. And if we think outside the box, kind of the way that Billy showed me, we can really utilize these a lot and give the guys a lot of good stuff. And like you said, the cleanup, the takedown, it makes it a lot quicker and more efficient, especially when we're on duty or with volunteer departments who have very limited time to get their training in and, get back home. So, yeah, there's absolutely a place for these. There's absolutely a place. And you can be aggressive with them.
Hey, Chief, maybe we can get Kyle's thoughts on this, the whole, gas fed versus Class A and some of his experiences with different clients and things.
Sure, yeah. It's funny, last night we were actually talking a little bit, and one of the things that was said by one of the gentlemen we were having dinner with was, everything we do in training in the fire service is a simulation, regardless of whether or not you are using a prop, right, a training prop. So, whether we're stacking pallets to do Class A burns or utilizing a gas-fed propane or a gas-fed live-fired prop or whatever prop you're using, what we're doing is typically a simulation because of the environment we have to train in. But what I liked that you said was the part about kind of you're in a little mobile laboratory. We actually have some experience in that, and you actually have some experience in that because at FDIC last year, you utilized the container system that we provided for ISFSI, and that had our Smart Class A system in it that utilizes propane and Class A material. So it's like the best of both worlds. You get the safety functionality and the controllability and the shutdown that Chief you were talking about, being able to kind of shut down immediately and take off for a run if you had one. So that's kind of like, yeah, the realism kind of missed it on propane a little bit, but then you're able to then have that with the propane and the Class A.
Yeah, and that was a tremendous opportunity to get to work with their device on that. And again, I just kind of want to play both sides of this game a little bit and be the devil's advocate. And so another thing that we've discussed, Kyle and I have discussed, and some of the other members up here while we're in the midst of this 1402 committee meeting, is as a fire instructor, one of the things that we constantly talk about in live fire instructor circles, and is very, very widely debated and widely discussed, is the fact that we, in a sense, set young firefighters up for failure. And although that sounds a little harsh, in terms of going in and squirt with water equals success, equals fire goes out. And some of the downfalls of that, again, a very common topic of conversation, and it's absolutely true. And that is one of the downfalls of doing the 3 pallets and some Excelsior in the corner of a concrete room, is that the fire does go out so easily. And so maybe, again, although I would certainly, I'm much more experienced in Class A than I am in propane fired props, and I would certainly lean that way. Maybe a flip side of this argument is that if you can continually apply your water aggressively as you're moving through, and the fire doesn't immediately go out because you're in that opportunity, you have that environment where you have the opportunity to kind of keep the fire around as long as you want it there. You can require a more aggressive water application during that simulated push for fire attack with gas-fed props, maybe even more so than with Class A fires. So maybe there's that's one potential, another way to look at it, maybe another benefit.
It's funny you actually say that. Even with the digital side of things, we found our customers are having more fun. I say fun, but training can be fun too. But more fun and having their students and their trainees have a really difficult time putting the fire out, because you can have the difficulty level set so high, or make it really difficult for your trainees with the digital panel. And like you're saying with your typical kind of what we call like legacy Class A, you throw a few droplets of water on it and it's out. But you could have that digital fire and all the smoke in the world going, and they got to sit there and pound it.
And for anybody tuning in that hasn't seen that stuff yet, there are quite literally digital fire simulators. I've only seen them the past couple of years at some of the trade shows and things like that, and I'm sure Kyle could get into it a little bit more. But there are literally, it's essentially kind of like a giant TV screen. And although, again, your knee-jerk reaction might be like what my knee-jerk reaction was, which is like, are you serious? Are you kidding me here? But there absolutely could be some benefits there going forward. You want to talk about that at all?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, basically, some of our biggest proponents for the system are those that can't do live fire at all, right? So they have no ability to train with live fire, so they need something to utilize their hose streams with. And Chief, like you were saying, you light up a cone, and that was your.
This is the modern version of a flashlight and a cone, right?
Right. Except that the panel actually gives you some feedback. It actually, when you hit it with the water, it cools the panel down. It darkens down. It actually tells the smoke generator what to do. So if the panel's on, the smoke generator is pumping smoke. If you hit the panel with water, it actually tells the smoke generator to put out more smoke to simulate steam. So it's actually, it's a lot more intelligent. We did what we had to do, in the older days with the cones and the flashlights. But yeah, it is essentially kind of, trying to accomplish the same task, but with some more feedback and difficulty levels and things of that nature. Sound effects. It's got the crackling fire and all that.
I think I was ahead of my time. I once accidentally put out a television set in the corner of a room in an apartment fire because we couldn't see anything, and I just saw a glow in the corner and blasted it. And maybe I was ahead of my time.
That's right.
How'd that work out for you,
man? But while you're talking about the while you're talking about the digital flames and so forth, you know, it's kind of interesting. I've never used one before, and in all reality, where we're at, it's not even something I ever considered. Never thought we would ever need it, use it. Okay, it's a nice gadget, but I'd rather put the money to something else in reality if I was doing my budget. But we used one maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago. We were teaching in Thibodaux, Louisiana, and we were teaching rapid intervention. And they pulled it out of the box. It had never been used, and said, "Hey, maybe you can use this." And we gave ourselves a quick course on it and set it up, and it really worked out well. We were operating in a big barn. We had set up a lot of different props in there for rapid intervention and removing a victim, and we used that and smoke generators together, and it was a pretty cool combination that I would certainly recommend in the future when we're doing these types of things, because obviously in that setting we're not going to be using live fire at any point. So it was kind of cool. It was definitely something new that, again, opened up some old guys' horizons. I guess we saw something different that we could use, and the students seemed to like it. They thought that it added some intensity to what we were doing, and so yeah, it's the first time I really experienced it, other than seeing it on the trade floor at FDIC. So pretty cool.
It's funny that something that I don't think we even knew existed a year or two ago is now out there, and not only out there, but all of us have had some type of firsthand experience with one. My neighboring department just built a Class A training facility, burn building with a tower, but they also went out and bought one of these digital fire simulators so that companies could go and use the burn building without having to have everything that they need to be NFPA compliant to do live fire training. And they demoed it for us and a bunch of chiefs, and pretty impressive, actually. And I think Brad makes a great point of, I think instructors have talked about all over the country that the concrete burn building that many of us were trained in, and trained people in, really does not simulate a real fire environment. You can get some heat going, especially if you burn all day long and that concrete soaks it up, and you can get some smoke, but that's a challenge. But it doesn't really teach the firefighters what we need to be teaching the firefighters from an extinguishment standpoint. And when Brad was talking about that, and Aaron, you as well, it popped out to me that, this is where the instructor is so important. And having that instructor who makes sure that explains that what you're doing and why you're doing it, and don't just knock the fire down if it's a couple of pallets and the fire goes out in 5 seconds. Keep that nozzle open. Make sure you get full extinguishment. Sweep the floor, sweep the ceiling above you, that sort of stuff. Flow some water. I mean, we have the water; it's plentiful in most cases, right? And I think we all, those of us that have been instructors for a while, have all heard the stories of, a new rookie fireman going to a fire and opening the bail for 5 seconds and immediately shutting it down. And they're doing that because that's what we trained them to do. And I think whether you're talking about props that we build ourselves or these commercial props that are available to us now, there's still a huge component of all this and importance of the instructor being there to instruct and make sure the students understand the difference between a simulated fire, whatever you're using, and a real fire, but also having some imagination, if you will, and creativity to take a barn and a bunch of stuff and a digital simulator and create a RIT drill that, I'm sure people walked away from saying, yeah, I learned something today. You guys' thoughts on that?
Well, yeah, I can tell you. First off, let's go into the instructor portion of it, because I think what you hit on there is something that we've talked about in the past on our shows, but this is it never gets old. When it comes to the instructor, a bad instructor will create, obviously, a bad firefighter. If you're not leading those students through these evolutions and explaining to them the limitations of our props and the limitations of how we're training, at the academy level versus what we're going to do in the field, you failed your students. And we all have seen it. We've all seen that probie come in and, maybe hook a little bit of a wall because they only had a little hook prop at the academy, so they didn't realize you had to open up the whole wall. or you didn't have to flow the nozzle hard because I cooled all those thermocouples, so now the fire's gone, you know, and that sort of thing. So yeah, a lazy instructor or a less than stellar instructor produces that. So we have to be on top of those guys, and we have to be on top of our instructing staff to make sure they're doing it the right way and utilizing the systems the way the systems have been designed, because I think that's the key. Is the systems are designed by engineers with the input of firefighters, yet we need to make sure that our people are understanding how they function. And there it goes to the creativity of instructors. I can tell you, I work with great instructors everywhere I go, I think, and I know the other training companies and the guys who are teaching FDIC, it's all the same. We've got some innovative guys that are just amazing when it comes to this, and giving their input to these guys who are building the props for us, whether it's, you know, Bull-X or you know, I can name them, you know, Kitty or Fire Blast or any of these guys. The more feedback they get from us, the better product we're going to get from them, and the better results we're going to get from our trainees. So, you know, I was proud that night because I had nothing to do with the RIT program. I was teaching other stuff. Walked in that barn that night and went, wow, you guys are kicking butt. And the students were coming out going, holy crap, I've never been through something like this. So it was cool. It was really cool. And I think the results will show in that fire department's operations if they had a job the next day.
And that's the bottom line. That's the goal, is to simulate the best we can the environment and teach people, right?
Yep.
Brad, I think you had a question from the audience you wanted to bring up.
Yeah, I was just checking my Twitter feed here and searching for FE Talk, just as one more final reminder, since we're kind of at the bottom of the hour here, hashtag FE Talk if you've got any more questions. Chief Joe Pernesti, a friend of mine, and certainly somebody known to a lot of anybody that follows fire engineering, asked or had a comment and a question. Says today's firefighters relate better using scenarios and sims, utilizing their own buildings and the use of sims for maydays for command work. And that kind of sparked my thought process. We're talking about props in terms of more physical props, but are there generational issues? That's something that we oftentimes get into as instructors. Are there generational issues with how to learn? Not that it would necessarily mean the difference that a younger generation or a millennial would learn more from for example, a digital prop versus a hands-on prop. Not necessarily going down that road, but along those lines, are there generational issues for how we should try to accomplish certain things in the simulation realm? For example, the software programs available and things like that, and more computer-based stuff around the firehouse, and even just simple things like using videos and to kind of make up some of that lack of fire experience that the newer generation is getting. So I guess I would take Chief Pernesti's comment and pitch it to you guys about simulation software and utilizing specific programs for your buildings, and any other techie kind of modern stuff that you could do on your smartphone or whatever the case may be to kind of enhance the training environment. Any thoughts on that?
Absolutely. I think there's obviously on the commercial side, there's a lot of software, simulation software for simulating fire tactics. Most of them revolve around command and control type stuff, whether you're using like a blue card type scenario where you're training incident commanders and company officers, or some of the other simulators that you can take a photograph of a building, add smoke to it, add fire to it, and just throw it up there and ask people, you know, hey, what would you do with this? And I know, Brad, you teach a class, talks about the company officer, and I don't want to steal your thunder, but you got some great ideas there that maybe you can share with people what you do around the kitchen table. But I'm guessing I'm not the only guy that does this, and I'll just throw it out there. You guys don't have to admit to it if you don't want to. But if I'm in the car driving down the street, especially if I'm by myself, something is on fire.
Yes.
A building I drove by, something I just passed, something I saw is on fire, and I'm thinking about strategy and tactics. You know, what companies would be on the box, what companies would be coming from where, what hydrants would I be doing, what assignments would I be giving those companies and stuff like that. And it may seem petty, but that's props, that's simulation. It's all up here in the brain. And you can take that and add some photographs to it, or add some video to it, or whatever to enhance it, make it a little better for the millennials. because everybody keeps telling us that they learn differently than we did, and add some of that stuff. And I think to my son, 13 years old, he's got no interest going and driving a tractor on a farm, but he'll spend hours on his laptop, in his virtual farm, farming the fields and taking care of the crops and everything like that. So I think you tie the two together. I mean, we're never going to get rid of the hands-on stuff. We're never going to get rid of the coffee table stuff. And Brad, I'd like you to hit on that a little bit, because those are props as well. But yes, I think as technology advances and the millennial firefighters come into the service, we need to add more of technology-based, if you will, simulations and things like that to what we do.
Go ahead, Brad. I totally agree with you, but I know you've got more experience in it, so jump in at it.
Okay, yeah, I'll just what Chief Pegram was alluding to a second ago is something that I talked a lot about in classes. I've got a class that I do called the Company Officers Instructor, being brought to you at FDIC 2017, by the way. Feel free to stop by and shameless plug there. Feel free to stop by and check it out. But since Chief Pegram brought it up, one of the things that we talk about in there, and I've written a little bit on fire engineering training community about this as well, is just something that we do with the Sunday paper, and at least I think that's where Chief was going with that. Something that we use our real estate section a lot in my department and my company specifically, where we'll do simulations and just not official simulations or using any particular type of software or anything like that, but just using the Sunday real estate section of the local paper and looking at houses in your jurisdiction, not just getting a whiteboard and drawing a little 2-story house with a roof on it on a whiteboard and saying, okay, well, where do you think the bedrooms are in this house? Does it have a basement or not? Where do you think the stairs are? What are some stairwell indicators we can look for? Do you think it's an occupied attic? Things like that. And then the beauty of that is you can then read the description of the house immediately below it and find out if you were right, in terms of reading buildings. But you can take that and determine fire flow. You can calculate tanker delivery rate requirements based upon the box that you would be getting on that particular address if you're in a rural environment. So there's a lot of different ways that you can take that. And so that's just a very simple example of a simulation. And while we've got our microphone on, and I'll kind of get the millennial perspective, or maybe I should. I don't want to throw any labels around here, but I will say I happen to know Kyle's a little bit younger than I am. I'm usually the baby of the bunch with most of these things. So we'll see if we can get his perspective on the fire training as it applies to kind of the younger generation.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. One of the things I've noticed, training my own department, is in the training or even just issuing commands or anything, a lot of the times you get the why, or they need to know what the end result's going to be. And maybe that has not a lot to do with simulation, but maybe that gives us a little insight of how to build our simulation or how to build our training programs, because they're always questioning, and maybe it's a good thing, maybe they're just trying to figure out if it's really necessary, which, if I say it's necessary, it's necessary.
Right.
At least that's always been our attitude, right? But yeah, that seems to be the new wave of things is, well, why do I have to do this? Or
do you think having something in their hand, like we were just talking about, using a picture or maybe a fire engineering magazine cover, there's always a building on fire every month on the front of it, things like that. Those are kind of some of the more old school ways of doing it. Do you think that the younger generation would rather have something that they can see on their smartphone or see on a computer screen?
I think everybody having something in their hand is the way of the future, right? And I visited a customer that actually built an entire simulation room. They pull their apparatus right into it to do their command and control, and not even just command, but their firefighters are also sitting around another table in another room, and the whole room's got wind direction and smoke included, and screens all around the whole apparatus, and they literally command inside of this basically studio.
Right. Some of the command training centers out there, and I'm sure you guys are both familiar with seeing some of those that they use for various command training programs, are just tremendous and incredibly immersive, right? And that's absolutely along the same kind of lines as to what we're talking about, specifically as he mentioned, as it relates to command training, the screens on all sides, and I mean, true immersion, just kind of like driving simulators or flight simulators, but command simulators, and in a lot of cases, incredibly realistic stuff. So
And we were talking last night a little bit. Maybe the future maybe is even in VR or something.
Right? Will there be a time and place when like a virtual reality thing that you put on your head is the next step from trying to put a fake front half of an SUV or something like that and surrounded by computer screens is the next logical step to do some kind of high resolution digital virtual reality type thing. And I know it seems corny, right? I mean, your first thought is, oh yeah, I'm gonna tell some old district chief in my organization to put this contraption on his face, and we're gonna do some fire training, and that might initially get a little resistance.
Fun to watch.
Yeah, it might get a little resistance, but I mean, we as instructors, as trainers, we've always got to keep our head on a swivel for what's next, right? And things like that might be what's next.
It's very interesting. I think that you're right. Speaking from the old generation, I got a year or two on probably all of you. Although Steve and I are pretty close since we went to college together. But I would tell you that, yeah, you're going to get pushback, but pushback is one of those things you deal with, and in time, the older guys who push back too hard are going to be gone anyway. So we need to kind of blend it together, and the ability to stretch lines and put out fires is important. The ability for us to teach our people how to do it the right way is so important, obviously. But if our leadership isn't going to see the same amount of fire that we saw, if our leadership doesn't have the battleground experience, so to speak, we've got to get it to them as best we can. And if simulation is the way in which we do it, if we're building rooms simply just for these purposes, and we can really get the guys involved in that, well, then I think a thinking mind and a motivated mind is the next best thing. So, I come from both sides of that story as well. And I don't know how big I'd embrace it as I'm this deep into my career, but I'd like to see it. I would certainly like to see it. And something's got to be done for the next generation of firefighters who simply aren't going to have, unless they're working in some really rough neighborhoods, they're not going to have that same level of experience that a lot of guys had. So it's a step. You got to look at it. You got to investigate it and expand on it. And let's go. Let's make good things happen. Right.
Yeah, it's not good enough to just complain about the next generation not having the fire volume that they had back in the 70s in the war years and stuff like that, right? We all recognize that that's the case. We've got to do something about it, right? And although it might initially on the surface seem corny to look at some of these different things, and you think, oh, that's not realistic, that's not reality, that's not going to put them in a good position to really be ready. At the same time, we've got to do something to bridge the gap.
Absolutely. We, as usual, are heading right towards the top of the hour pretty rapidly. And I did want to hit on, we've focused and we've talked a lot about the commercially built props of all different shapes and sizes and computer simulation, stuff like that. But I know probably each of us have had some experience with just building something on the bay floor, figuring out something we want to do. And I know, the popular ones that I see a lot of firehouses have, whether it's out in the bay or in the parking lot behind the building, is like the Denver drill or the bailout window or things like that. Either of you want to chime in a little bit of your experience with some of those maybe props that a listener who doesn't have a big budget, doesn't have the opportunity for a mobile fire training trailer to come to their facility, something they can do with a hammer and a nail?
Sure. We, when we're traveling around all over the place, we see all kinds of different things, and some of them are really fantastic, and some of them are firefighter killers. I know of a prop just built here in Jersey. Good friend of ours that is a FDIC instructor. His department hired a company to come in and do bailout training, and they built a bailout prop that was deadly. I mean, it was held in by nothing, and it was dangerous. And he took pictures and emailed them to me, and I went, oh my God. So, we've got to look at it from a safety aspect, especially when we're going above grade. When we start going up, we've got to be cautious. But you can do a million things with simply doing a flat roof prop out of pallets and OSB. We were doing it the other day when we were in Missouri. They built a really nice pitched roof prop, which is very simple to do in your back of your firehouse. Lots of guys are doing it. Some 2x4s, some 2x6s, and some OSB, and you can really do a good job with it in a very safe manner. And the guys said, well, we got this great pitched roof, but we don't do anything for flat roof. So I watched the instructor throw down 6 pallets and, screw down some OSB, and son of a gun, we're doing flat roof prop all of a sudden. So it's that simple, and pallets are dime a dozen. Guys are, they give them away if you go to your local places that have them. So that's a biggie. You can make a lot of cattle chutes basically to stretch line through in your bay or in your back of your firehouse, wherever you want to do it, where it's just creating the walls and the obstacles and the hallways to move line around. These are not expensive fixes. So the people who say, oh, I got no budget, so I can't train, that's just a BS excuse. These things can be done with some screws and nails and some 2x4s and pallets. So there's, I think the only limitation is really your mind. It really is.
You just reminded me of one real quick, Aaron, that we used here in Goshen this summer that, it's silly. I never thought of it, but had an instructor, Danny Doyle, who teaches hot training as well from Pittsburgh. And he was teaching us some engine company operations with 2.5s, flowing and moving a 2.5.
Yep.
And we did it in the woods. We found a wooded area behind the firehouse where there was a whole bunch of trees, and our obstacles, our corners, our hallway were the trees. So you were going in and out. It seems kind of silly, but it was hard work.
Yeah.
And it was really easy to kink up that hose or get it caught on a tree. And we had to make 6 turns around some trees and then flowing water the whole time.
Wait, you mean it was hard for the guys doing it?
that would include me. I could send you the video.
Lead by example, Chief. Always lead by example.
Yeah. Or eat your words, right?
That's for sure.
Hey, something just real quick to add on to that I think is incredibly important. You brought up some of the types of props that you can just make around the station, and I think it's so incredibly important. Some of the ones you specifically brought up, the Denver drill, the impactful lessons you can have from a historic fire service perspective on firefighters by doing that, because not only is it the physical mechanics of doing the Denver drill, it's the story of Mark Langbart and the actual dimensions of that room and explaining to the students exactly how this prop is constructed. And hopefully the instructors or the training center folks that are making these props go the extra mile to make sure that they're simulating what those conditions were and telling that story. Similar with the Nance drill and stuff like that, there are a lot of case study incidents that some of these more kind of homegrown props are based out of. And obviously there's a tremendous training value in going through those stories and learning those lessons from line of duty deaths, in addition to just, it's not just a piece of wood, right? It's a piece of wood with exact dimensions that tell a story in the case of the Denver drill, and how important that is.
I'll kick you another easy one to do is we've found going around the country that rotary saw operations leave a whole lot to be desired in fire departments, just because it's probably the most dangerous tool we operate. We don't operate it much. We take it out on the apron, we fire it up, and then we shut it back down and we put it back on the rig. John Simpson, who's a founding fool and another FDIC instructor, he showed me a whole different way of doing burglar bar training and a cut prop that we build out of 2x4s and 2x6s, and you leave it at the firehouse. I've probably built 20 of these things over the years, and it's just great training. And on-duty guys can go out there. All they need is some rebar or some flat stock or whatever, and boom, you've got a cut prop. And now you utilized your rotary saw. Even if you only do it once every 6 months, you did it. And it's another prop that probably for 50 or $100 worth of lumber. And if you're in an area like me where there's lots of construction, just go dumpster diving, man. There's tons of wood around, and you can get rebar at Home Depot. So little stuff. Like I said, I taught in Missouri the other day. They bought a few props and they mounted them and so forth. Great stuff, but they spent a large amount of money that, honestly, now that I've seen them, those props, number one, they weren't patented, so that's easy. But two, they gave us some good ideas as to how to look at it, and we'll build them in our firehouse so our guys have that same stuff. whatever it takes. It's just thinking outside the box, man. It's really what it is.
As long as, and somebody brought this up earlier, I believe Aaron mentioned this earlier, one of the things that we've been beaten like a dead horse over the past couple of days at this NFPA 1402 meeting, and where one of the topics that we talk about is specifically about props, is the importance of safety and the downfall sometimes of people just slapping together some stuff and then putting a person on it, right? Or putting a person in it, or whatever the case may be. And you know, and I'm certainly not going to get into the minutia of the standards and the development process and stuff like that we're looking at up here. But nonetheless, understanding the importance of safety for the members that you're putting into these things, right? And as you're making these, just what Aaron brought up the other day, a bailout prop that somebody easily could have, you know, whatever kind of failure it could have suffered, or poor anchor points, or whatever the case may be. Doing it right is so important. Doing it cheap is good, but you know, doing it right is just as important for the safety of the personnel. And maybe if you're in a situation where you can't do it right and you can only do it cheap, then maybe you should look at other options, whether that be regionalization, or taking your folks to another, you know, sending them to FDIC to do some of that training or something along those lines. So again, I just kind of wanted to emphasize the importance of that safety concept. And although we're all big fans of homegrown things, there's a limit to how far you can push that needle, and certainly we all see that.
Well, yeah. Listen, I live in New Jersey. There's a lot of 1403, 1402 case studies that have come out of New Jersey. So, you know, school buses and welding don't go well together. You know, I mean, it's just guys have good intentions in the beginning, and then it goes all wrong if you're not cautious and really put some forethought into it. You know, that's what there's some classes on prop building at FDIC. Take them.
Yeah.
I know that Jimmy McCormick offers a big program out at his facility about that some guys I'm friends with just came back from and said they loved it, and that's what they're gonna go with some of that. They're gonna integrate what he taught them with what they can buy through some of the big manufacturers. So find your happy median. But yeah, Brad, you're absolutely right. I mean, guys, you can kill firefighters if you're not, you know, working within the parameters of safety.
And one real final thing to mention on that, I know we're getting real close on time here, and I'll kick it back to Chief Pegram, but one other thing I've been doing in some of the meetings we've had the past couple of days has been sitting there on my laptop searching the firefighter near miss database. And that's something that doesn't seem to get a whole lot of press anymore, and some people might not even be familiar with. But I've spent a lot of time searching the firefighter near miss database at firefighternearmiss.com for training related and prop related accidents and injuries and things like that. So just a really kind of sidebar, not off topic, but kind of a sidebar thing. If you have any interesting stories of close call incidents in training structures that obviously weren't line of duty deaths, obviously we can look at NIOSH reports and things like that, but anything that was that not quite a NIOSH report type of incident, please don't forget that the fire service has that database available to us, and it does get searched and looked at from time to time for various things, including some of the work that we're doing here.
Awesome. Well, Kyle, I'd like to kick it back to you real quick. We're at the top of the hour. If there was one thing that you think is on the horizon for Bullex or for the industry, as far as fire training and simulation and props, what do you think? Where do you think we're headed?
Yeah.
If he told you, he'd have to kill you.
Yeah, right. No,
yeah, don't give away any trade secrets and don't get yourself fired.
I think it's exactly what we started with, and it's the progression of training, and I think it's you know, starting off with the digital to, and it doesn't have to necessarily be digital, but you know, in our case, we'd love it to be, to you know, advancing from a point where, you know, you put your trainee into a situation where it gives them a little bit of a test, you know, in our case, a digital fire, and then advance up to a gas fire. And this is just, you know, fire training, of course, but, and then a controllable Class A fire that has safety parameters, and you can get behavior training inside that environment. So that's what, you know, I think that's what excites us at Bullex, certainly in my part of the business at Bullex, excites me. So that'd be the one thing, is that progressive training.
Awesome.
Chief, I'll kick it back to you. Thanks for having us.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for coming on. Believe it or not, we're at the top of the hour already. I think just to summarize real quick, I think when we're talking about training, we're talking about props, simulations. Imagination is key, creativity. Work with your neighbors. You may not be able to do it, but you can if you get together with your neighbors and friends and put your minds and your resources together. Seek out grant opportunities. Make sure that safety is first. We don't want to be hurting and killing firefighters in training ever. And the importance of the instructor and the instructor's role in not only coming up with the idea, setting everything up, making sure it's safe, but also teaching that the right skills are being utilized and they understand the difference between a simulation and the real thing. Happy holidays to everybody. By the time we talk again, it will be a new year. Hopefully 2017 will be an awesome one for all of us. And we will talk to you again about fire training on Humpday Hangout Wednesday, January 4th, 2017. So take care, everybody.